Welcome back to another session on my channel. This is the Andrew Tucker TV channel, where we render biting, incisive political and social commentaries. And today we're going to be looking at a political commentary because today, September the 16th, 2025, marks the inauguration ceremony of Dr. Andrew Michael Holness as he wins or he won his third consecutive term in office. Now, we are going to be looking at this very important title this afternoon or this morning when the video shall have reached you. Andrew Holness's third term, shocking crisis ahead. Now, Andrew Holness is starting his third term, but what nobody's telling you is that Jamaica faces hidden crises that could shake the nation. From political tension to international pressure, the next few years will not be easy, and you need to know what's coming. Very important. Make sure that you like and you share and you subscribe to the channel. And I would encourage you, as soon as the video is published, that you interact with the video so that the algorithm will send the videos. If you do not respond to the videos, if the videos don't have early engagement, then the algorithm will not push the video along. So as soon as you see the video, please click on it, start to like it and to comment so that the algorithm can push the video along. Now, first, let's look at Jamaica at home. Now, we hear that we have been having declining crime rates, even though we know that there has not been an attempt to dismantle the garrisons, which I have been saying on my other channel, Rumination with Andrew, that if we want to really dent the crime wave, if we want to really put a permanent dent in the crime rate, there are several factors, there are several things that we have to look at. First of all, the fact is the guns, which are being trafficked into the country with the complicity of a lot of our politicians, even though they speak as if they are not in control of the trafficking of the arms, but they know, and many of them are, and it is an economic industry in which many of them are wreaking lucrative profits. At the end of the day, it has consequences, grave consequences for people, including that arms can be used to snuff out the lives of our Jamaican people. Now, last week we saw the incident in Mandeville where there was a shootout and there was over a simple argument in terms of, I can't remember what the cost of a particular item was. And because the customer had not agreed with the vendor, then there was a launching of gun attacks on the vendor. And of course, both of them succumbed because eventually the police got involved. The man who was shot, the vendor who was shot, he succumbed to his injuries. And eventually, when the police confronted the guy, because he was hidden in this house, in this apartment complex in Mandeville, and the police had a shootout, and he was also shot. That's the accuser, the accused, and he also succumbed to his injuries upon arriving at the hospital. Now, so we know that dangers of guns are still lurking in Jamaica. And now that the election is over, we do not know if there is going to be a resurgence. I think there will be if we are not looking at the root cause of crime and violence. Another factor that contributes to crime and violence is a whole matter of garrison constituencies in which these armed thugs believe that they are the leaders of these communities and they are more powerful than our politicians because our politicians over the years have lost power to them. Okay. Now, in recent times, we also have been hearing about the trafficking of drugs and other things which we have not solved. So these are things which are going to still contribute to crime and violence, including our widespread poverty rates. Right? So contrary to what the government is saying, our poverty rates are still high, and it will continue to contribute to the high levels of crime and violence, which we have been experiencing over the years, despite the reduction, as the Prime Minister and his team have indicated, have told us. So the economic struggles that we have in Jamaica, we're still having serious high cost of living. And even though they tell us that inflation is also stable, the fact is that when you go to the supermarkets, it's not stable. And when you have to interact with the economy, paying your bills, your light bill, your internet bills, your food bills are all expensive and they're high. So that also is, the real inflation when we talk about inflation. Now, and public frustrations are building tension. Citizens are demanding real change, and any misstep could spark major protests or political backlash. Holness's administration must act carefully. One wrong move and the unrest could explode. And this is very important, that one wrong move and the explosion, the protest could explode. Why? Because when we look at the election, when we take a closer look at the recently held election, we can see that only 39.5% of the registered voters went out to vote. And Holness, he copped how many seats? 35 of the seats to the PNP's 28. Okay. So what it means, therefore, if that level of voter participation was so low, it means, therefore, you have 60% of a silent majority. And you have to be careful when people are silent. You don't know what they're thinking. My understanding of the election is that it was diehard GLP versus diehard PNP. That is what. So you have the diehards from the GLP who contested against the diehards of the PNP, and the diehards of the GLP won. But this was not an election that you could say represented the majority of the citizens, represented the voices. And this is where the government of Jamaica will have to tread on light ground. Now, we might be taking for granted that over the years, the voter turnout has always been low for some years now. But we must understand that people take things so long and no more. So we can't take the silent majority for granted, thinking that they are always going to remain silent. Eventually, they will act. And sometimes the government might find itself in a very precarious position. So the Prime Minister Andrew Holness is not receiving a mandate from the Jamaican people to govern. He's receiving a mandate from his diehards to govern. But of course, Jamaica is for all Jamaicans. And if the majority of the people are not expressing their voice, are not letting their voices be heard, it means, therefore, that something is fundamentally wrong with our political machinery, with our political system, that we must study, that we must analyze. And I see persons like the political commentator, the Chinese political commentator, what's his name, Chinese Jamaican, I just forgot his name right now, but he was suggesting Chang, O'Brien Chang, right? He was suggesting in his article in the Observer this morning that, this election was a favorable election because people danced and, in our musically drenched society. He was suggesting that, the music that they presented and the festive nature of the elections was something that he was impressed with. Now, yes, you can say that, but at the end of the day, when the party is finished and people have to eat and people have to deal with the realities, with the harsh economic realities, they're not necessarily going to be jumping up and saying, time come. Right? Yes, they might be saying time come, but time come to behead the prime minister or his government. We hope that these things don't happen, because you cannot play with people's lives and think that it's going to be business as usual. We have to confront the harsh economic and social realities that bedevil our country. We must do that. And these are the things that Andrew Holness will have to confront if he's going to have a successful third term in office. Next, we know the economy, the debt levels, the inflation, and international loans are putting Jamaica under pressure. The IMF and global institutions expect reforms, but implementing them could anger the public. Holness will have to balance foreign expectations with local survival, a nearly impossible task. And that is what is happening. Even though we're hearing much about the IMF and our debt is going down, we don't know what the memorandum of understanding still is. And we do not have a specific number in terms of, we know that it is now down to what, maybe 63, going down to 62% of GDP. But we want to see figures, and so that we can make our own analysis. We just don't want to have these, authorities spit out numbers to us and tell us that we should believe what they're telling us, because we can't believe them. We have had many experiences that we cannot trust our politicians. So why would we trust them with even IMF numbers? And the IMF cannot be trusted itself, right? The IMF itself as an institution cannot be trusted. It is also an undemocratic institution. All right. So why are we putting our confidence in these institutions and in these people that direct these institutions? It's time for us now to wake up and understand that the IMF is not there to shape our future and to improve our lot. They're not there to do that. In fact, they are there to worsen it, to compound the situation. We must begin now to understand and to grow up and to mature intellectually as a people, which we have not yet matured. Okay? Now, politically, Holness must contend with opposition parties and internal divisions. Any failure to address domestic issues could strengthen rivals and undermine his agenda. The stakes are higher than ever for his third term. Now, yes, we can see already that Mark Golding is suggesting that Dr. Andrew Holness, that there were lots of irregularities during the election. He's not coming out with any evidence per se, but he is making allegations that's Mark Jefferson Golding, the opposition leader, that there were lots of irregularities, including voter suppression and voter buying, and vote buying rather, during the elections, which we know that these things happen every year. But, we understand that when the shoe is on the other foot, that the opposition can make a stink and they can create controversies and pretend as if they are the innocent ones, they're the victims, when they're not, because when the shoe is on the other foot, when they are the government, they behave the same way. They behave the same way, and perhaps worse. But, our citizens are, compliable, right? And they are amenable. They are not critical thinkers, so they will actually run with the current, with the wind, as it were. Okay, and I expect that to happen, so that there's going to be a lot of opposition. We're already seeing Rattigan, and he's keeping up that opposition against Dr. Michael Andrew Holness. And I really want Dr. Andrew Michael Holness, rather. I really wonder what Rattigan's motive is. Is it to help Jamaica? Why is he so obsessed with one political party? Why doesn't he look at the political system as a whole and unpack the system? Why is he just being partisan as the typical Jamaican is? The only difference is that he's doing it from North America. What is Vatican's motive? What is his agenda? I don't know. Okay, now the fact of the matter is, we can look at the fact that when we look at the geopolitics, this is now Andrew Holness's big challenge that he will have to face. Already we are seeing ships in the Caribbean Sea, in the Southern Caribbean Sea, or Southern Caribbean waters, right? And there are allegations that the United States is about to depose the government of Nicolas Maduro. That's the president of Venezuela. And Kingston is rather very quiet about what is happening. And I've registered my discontent with what Andrew Holness, or his silence, is actually portraying. But, there are individuals who think that we should keep ourselves out of war. I believe so too. I think that we should be peacemakers. But what I don't like is that we also have to be principled. We have to take a principled stance in whatever we do. And when the fact that Trump could have blown up a boat in the Caribbean seas, in Caribbean waters, without following due process, without, ensuring that the accused, that the people that he was accusing, that they were actually convicted of the crime that he alleged that they committed. 11 people on board were blown up in Caribbean waters. That is something that is incredible. That is something that is incredible. Remember what happened, I think it was in the 1970s, when a plane leaving from Barbados to Cuba en route to Cuba was also struck down. And many people think that the CIA was involved in that, right? That they actually contracted a Cuban uh, citizen to have done that. Okay. Now we have to make, or we have to really let our voices be heard under such circumstances. Because what if it is to be done in our waters, where fishermen or just people who are just, traveling on high sea, and then the United States is going to just blow that ship up, blow that boat up. And I understand, and based on what Reuters and other papers are, and even the AP, even the AP News, which are really associated and aligned with the United States military-industrial complex, even they have acknowledged that the boat was actually trying to get back on shore. It was returning when they saw what was happening, and they might have seen the US warships or planes flying, in the air, and they decided that they were going to go back on shore. And it's whilst they were trying now to return, and that the US struck the boat and blew them up. Now that is something that rather very concerning. That should be concerning to all of us in the Caribbean waters, but around the world too, that the United States can describe whomever it wants to describe as a terrorist. And if it says so, even if the law has not yet convicted them, then they are. It means, therefore, that it's erosion of free speech, right? It's the erosion of due process. It means, therefore, that the president doesn't have to send you to a court of law. It can say that the final buck stops with the president of the United States. And that is what he's suggesting. The final buck stops with him. He doesn't have to go to the courts to get their permission, to get their opinion on the matter. All right? He doesn't have to do that. And we're not talking about these things. We're not hearing even our legal scholars in Jamaica speaking, or political commentators are not, they're quiet. Literally not saying anything. And there was an article here written by professor, and her name is Professor John from York University, and she suggests that is Tamanisha John. And the title of the article was "The Historical and Contemporary Role of Neocolonial Caribbean Governments, U.S. Militarism, and I think she was saying aid. The historical and contemporary role of neocolonial Caribbean governments in supporting U.S. militarism and imperialism in the region. That was it was not fully up on my screen here. Now, the Caribbean region is a clearly militarized zone, she's saying, with the United States at the helm. Today's militarization in the region is reminiscent of the kinds of early iterations also led by the US from the 1970s to the early 2000s. The US Trump administration reportedly carried out a missile strike in the Caribbean on September 2nd under the pretense of combating drug trafficking in the region. Based on video released by the US, the military strike utilized a drone and/or aerial bomb to target a boat that allegedly departed from Venezuela, which the US State Department accuses of being a narco-trafficking organization and not a state, and purportedly contained non-specified drugs and 11 unidentified human beings, so-called narco-traffickers. So notice that the Trump administration is or has branded the Venezuela, they have branded Venezuela as a narco state. Well, they say it's not a state. It is a narco corporation, as the article here is suggesting. She went further on to say that Jamaica is actually not on the list declaring peace, right? It doesn't want peace, it seems, in the Caribbean seas. She called out Guyana, Trinidad, and Jamaica for opposing peace. Okay, that is what she's suggesting. And of course, at this point in time, she really gave a very interesting history of the prime minister then of Dominica. That's Charles, Eugene Charles. And the fact that she supported Washington in the invasion of Venezuela, not Venezuela, but Grenada in 1983. Right? She supported that sort of endeavor, that invasion, which was very brutal for a small nation that was of no threat to the United States. Now, fast forward to 2025, she was able to connect the dots, and she realizes that at this juncture, Trinidad and Tobago is now the country that the United States is using to invade Venezuela. All right, so there is a parallel there. So oftentimes he says, whenever US imperial undertakings happen, whenever these agendas are, what should I say, achieved, a lot of times Caribbean governments are complicit. Okay, hear what he's saying here. Prior to their surge in the CARICOM was preparing a letter of assurance to the US, the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, shared that although the vast majority of CELAC members want peace in Latin America and the Caribbean, CELAC did not put out a statement because a minority, which I add, opposed it. Those listed as opposing peace in the region were as follows: Argentina, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guyana, Jamaica, Paraguay, Peru, and Trinidad and Tobago. All right, so this is what she's saying. All of these countries are the ones that are opposing peace. And she begins by specifying here, it says a lot that 3 of the 4 founding states of CARICOM, Guyana, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago, are listed as opposing. They are listed in opposition, rather, to peace in the region. Barbados, the 4th founding member of CARICOM, was in support of a CELAC statement calling for regional peace. So at least Mia Motley's Barbados, we have to credit her for that, whether she means it or not, is calling for peace, while Jamaica is not calling for peace. Jamaica did not even support that letter. And many people are saying, well, because the prime minister is tied up with elections and post-election events, and that might be true. But this is a very serious matter, and something, whether he likes it or not, will decide whether he's going to have a successful term, a successful 3rd term in office. Geopolitics matter. And it's time for Jamaicans now to understand that the prime minister and our leaders in Jamaica do not run the show. That the shots are called from Washington, the shots are called from the, whatever centers in London and Brussels. Okay? Those are where the shots are called from, not from Jamaica House. And that is what you have to understand, which many of you have not yet understood. So you're saying, why are you talking about it? Why don't you leave it alone? The prime minister is for Jamaica and the development of Jamaica. And of course, that's what he should be. But that's not the world we live in right now. We don't have sovereign states anymore, as you think we have. Not even the United States is a sovereign nation. And I hope you understand that. And their citizens are finding that out, very painful reality for them, but they are trying to confront. They're trying to come to grips with that reality. Why can't we do the same? Right? Why can't we do the same? I don't know why. But these are the challenges, ladies and gentlemen, that the Andrew Holness-led government will confront. So what do you think? Can Andrew Holness navigate these hidden crises, or is Jamaica headed for turbulence in the next few years? Comment below with your comments. The most insightful answers will be featured in our next video. Yeah, and when you respond and you respond immediately, I'll definitely call you, big you up in the video and let them know that you are responding, particularly if your response is very insightful, as I'm suggesting here. So thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. Like the video so the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. Hope to see you in another video very soon. Remember to like the videos and to watch them and to leave a thoughtful and insightful comment. Thank you.